Volodymyr, it's great to be with you here this morning to talk about this incredibly important topic of rebuilding Ukraine. But before we get into the questions today, it'd be really interesting to hear how, as a Ukrainian lawyer, have you ended up working out of the London office of Mayor Brown?
Thank you, Amy. It's my pleasure being here, and I'm feeling actually privileged to sharing my thoughts on Ukrainian recovery here in London. On 21st of February this year, I went into a business trip to London, and in a few days after that, just 3 days then, I woke up here in London in new reality, the same as my country. My wife and daughters, one of which just 2 months is old at that time, made a not easy travel to Western Ukrainian border. And hopefully the next day we reunited all together in Warsaw, in Poland. And thanks for me doing international work in arbitration, construction, infrastructure. Many wonderful lawyers I'm got acquainted with contacted me immediately, offered support to my family, to Ukraine, to the country. And one of them was Rachel O'Grady, and from arbitration practice, Rachel introduced me to the team, and I was pleased to be offered to join London office, and feeling really privileged now to help navigate Mayor Brown clients in the areas of my expertise.
Well, it's really lovely to have you here. I'm very glad you're here and your family's safe. So let's just start with the questions. You've recently just returned from the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Lugano. Can you just talk a bit about the conversations that were happening there about rebuilding Ukraine?
Sure. The conference was a great event. It was high-level, political and business event attended by hundreds of top-ranked politicians and officials representing international organizations, governments, and international financial institutions, as well as management and owners of Ukrainian and international business. The key part of the event was a presentation of Ukrainian recovery plan prepared by the Ukrainian government.
And what are the priorities and areas of focus for this plan?
The plan is a result of work of a Recovery Council established by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, which involved thousands of pages of work already done together with international partners and experts. Basically, when we speak about recovery and the plan, it includes such topics and areas as environmental, infrastructure, economic, as well as social recovery. This includes dozens of issues on which specific plans already elaborated, like digitalization, diversification of logistics, military defense, security, energy security, particularly, just to name a few. Interesting that the government in Lugano made clear that some areas require actions already now, before the war ends even, and the government calls this emergency recovery. And this is reconstruction of bridges, roads, new railway tracks, also border checkpoints, and some of international companies and partners of Ukraine already getting involved into this now.
And are there any issues that need to be considered when focusing on these priorities?
For sure. The conference actually concluded with a declaration of principles, so-called Lugano principles, and in which was agreement between the government of Ukraine and international partners. And one of the key issues is whether recovery will be done in accordance with international standards, with transparency and accountability principles. In this respect, I think this one of the key issues is which body will be managing the recovery, and it's still up to be decided who will be responsible for this. And Also, another issue is coordination between the donors. Many governments, international organizations offered support, are willing to be involved, but how they will ensure coordination between themselves and the government of Ukraine.
And what do you think a recovery is actually going to look like?
In the end of June this year, European Parliament and Council uphold Ukrainian application for a candidate to the European Union. So certainly this is a great news for Ukraine, and the EU will play an important role in Ukrainian recovery, and the recovery will be aligned with the EU membership road. This might be similar to the Polish way, which is considered a good example of benefiting to joining the EU. I think it's unlikely will be like post-war recovery in Afghanistan or Iraq. It will be more like post-Second World War Europe, a whole kind of Marshall Plan for Ukraine.
And who are the key stakeholders going to be in all of this?
As just discussed, EU, I think, will be one of the key of them. However, many international financial institutions like European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, European Investment Bank already are on board, and for sure international governments, more than 40 international governments, international organizations were present in Lugano, and private business is also an important player, as well as think tanks, NGOs, and other interested to support Ukrainian recovery.
And how is it going to all be funded?
The funding is an important question. Interesting that the government of Ukraine, as first source of funding, announced actually Russian-related assets, which now are sized globally. And the Ukrainian government working with international partners on a way how to further trace, arrest, and recover from these assets for the benefit of Ukrainian people. Of course, this is not the only source. International governments, international financial institutions are another important stakeholders in this regard. It's expected that at least at the beginning, the funding will be in the form of grants, which, however, shall be conditional and according to some milestones.
And how much financial assistance do you think is anticipated here?
Before going to Lugano, I heard figures of hundreds of billions, but at Lugano I'm already hearing that we speak of the amount more than 1 trillion, and we will see. Much will depend, of course, when the war will end. Unfortunately, the damages are increasing every day. And
again, obviously, it is dependent on when the war does end. But what is the expected time frame for that recovery?
In addition to the war need to be finished, when we speak about long-term plans for recovery, because limited can be done now before the war ends. Even the government require support already now. I think personally that much will depend how international partners and Ukrainian government manage to make investment climate friendly for inflow also of direct foreign investors and technology. This will also influence the timing of the recovery.
And how could our clients assist with that recovery?
International governments, financial institutions, and organizations already now require advice on how to structure and how to organize funding, and also analysis of the way how the funding shall be done. This plan, which was announced, is only beginning. Many working groups continue elaborating on this. Some private companies already getting involved in relation to this urgent recovery, as well as bringing know-how and their technologies to help develop plans for long term after the war will end.
That's all incredibly interesting. Thank you so much, Volodymyr. Just before we end, as a final question, you let us know what your thoughts are. What are the key takeaways, do you think, for any of our clients who are watching this today?
Unfortunately, it's still very uncertain when and how the war in Ukraine ends. At the same time, my impressions from Lugano are quite optimistic in respect of that the global community, Ukraine, international and local business and governments are united and work on the recovery plan already now. It has been announced that the next recovery conference will be in London the next year, and the work is now every day and continues. And it's a good time to be engaged for both urgent and long-term recovery plans for anybody interested. And we here in Meyer Brown will be happy to navigate our clients in this respect.